Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Catherine Prince. I work as Vice President Foresight and Strategy at KnowledgeWorks. KnowledgeWorks is a national nonprofit based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and working across the U.S. And I'm joining you from Columbus, Ohio. KnowledgeWorks works to help all students pursue the kinds of learning experiences that enable to uncover their passions and thrive in an evolving world. We help our partners in schools and states reimagine what education can do through personalized competency-based learning. Since 2005, KnowledgeWorks has been forecasting the future of education, helping to bring insights from the field of strategic foresight to the education sector. And strategic foresight is a professional field that helps people anticipate long-term change and use insights from that look ahead to inform their strategies and actions today. So we work with people across the education landscape to imagine future possibilities and explore strategies for responding to the changing landscape and pursuing our preferred futures. As we explore possibilities around future educator roles today, I'll invite you to embrace your imaginations, knowing that we can't realize what we can't envision. And I'll also invite you to take the long view. When we look to the future, so 10 years out or more, as we'll be doing today, we're in the space of what if, asking what could be different in a decade or more than exists today. Today, we'll be drawing upon ideas and insights from a KnowledgeWorks publication called Envisioning Educator Roles for Transformation. This publication looks ahead 10 years to imagine future educator roles that promise to promote more widespread learner-centered education, making education systems more responsive to the needs of learners and better places for adults to work. It presents 8 potential future educator roles that can help each learner have educational experiences that really center their needs, interests, and passions, and help them have the power to make choices about not just what they'll do in the future, but also who they'll be in their years beyond K-12 education. As we developed ideas for future educator roles, we were starting with that aspiration that education systems become more learner-centered. So we were considering what kinds of roles might help education systems be more responsive to learners' needs. And we also wanted to think about how considering a wider range of roles or different set of roles than is common in education systems today could help improve educators' working conditions, knowing that so often we just pile more and more responsibilities on teachers and administrators instead of thinking about job differentiation. And lastly, we wanted to address systemic issues, such as the need for various kinds of capacity building among educators as circumstances change, and the ongoing challenges around realizing our aims around equity. As we look to the future of educator roles, consider what might the educator workforce become in relationship to our aspirations for learner-centered education. We need to consider how the world is changing. So these drivers of change help us situate our exploration of future possibilities for educator roles in the changing landscape around education. So we know we're living it out that technologies are accelerating. AI and other developing technologies such as extended reality and the blockchain have been gaining in capability and in application. And they're opening up new possibilities for how educators design learning experiences and spend their time. There are also deepening concerns about digital equity, privacy, and data security. And attention is emerging about the extent to which people will be aware of when they're using AI and have choice as to how they're using it in education settings. We're also living through an intensifying climate crisis, with more and more people around the world feeling its effects. We've been seeing eco-anxiety and physical health impacts of climate change increase. But at the same time, we've been seeing more and more efforts to mitigate its effects through efforts towards sustainable practices. We anticipate that over the next decade, schools and other learning providers will face more and more disruptions to their daily operations as we're all navigating the impacts of climate change, such as extreme weather. And we could be finding that more and more students are having to move as they get displaced by climate crises, or that they're navigating more and more health impacts on an ongoing basis. We're also living through a time of civic polarization. While it manifests differently in different parts of the world, many places have been fighting for just societies, even as populism has been growing globally. And education is increasingly the focus of debates. In the US, that's been manifesting through things like attempts to ban books, for government and parents to control what schools teach about race and gender, and through increasing attention to school board elections. We're expecting that over the next decade, education will remain at the center of debate, making it harder and harder to pursue intentional system redesign. And lastly, our economy is changing. A big factor here is, again, generative AI. It's leading us to need to partner increasingly with smart machines in many kinds of settings. Generative AI is also increasing the potential for technological displacement of human workers, especially knowledge and creative workers. And other factors such as shifting populations, changing global landscape, and workers' ongoing quest for better conditions have also been impacting the economic landscape. So we're expecting that these kinds of changes to work and economy will complicate what it means to prepare learners for life after their K through 12 years, and for children and families to thrive. So this is the kind of landscape we're navigating as we pursue our aspirations for the future of learning. And in that context, we imagined these 8 future educator roles when developing the paper, Envisioning Educator Roles for Transformation. Again, we were hoping that these roles could help spark thinking about how education systems could pursue more learner-centered environments, while also improving working conditions for adults. And as we were developing them, we were inspired by our framework from the Christian Institute, which helps people think about the jobs that need to be done in different settings. We were strongly relating these roles to the US public education system as we created them. And also, they can apply in other kinds of education settings, including community-based learning environments, such as schools, libraries, or after-school programs. The roles range from those working really closely with learners and families, to those working with other educators, to those tending to education systems. Among those roles that are really focused on direct contact with learners and families, the Learning Spark Facilitator, Learner Advocate Advisor, and Family Connection Coordinator are helping to craft learning journeys that really meet learners' needs, are advocating for learners and helping to provide whole child support, and then helping families and caregivers meet their short-term needs while also involving them in the future life of the school. The Educator Development Coach is helping colleagues have really highly personalized professional development plans and support in carrying them out. And the Director Advisor of Artificial Intelligence focuses on helping colleagues across a group of schools, such as a school district, make highly effective use of AI. And the Partnership Navigator, Continuous Improvement Curator, and Chief Opportunity Officer are tending to education systems, helping build capacities and carry out goals at that systemic level. Whether it's bringing more resources into the school and helping learners get out to explore their interests and meet their goals, or as the continuous improvement does, helping the learning community use data really effectively, or in the case of the Chief Opportunity Officer, helping to really guide the learning community in realizing its equity-related schools while holding accountable to learners and families and other educators. So in imagining these roles, we weren't saying that teachers and administrators, as we know them, will go away. And we also weren't trying to come up with a comprehensive list of all the roles that could exist in future education systems. We're really seeking to encourage creative thinking about what might be possible for the future of learning and the future education workforce. And I'm curious, which of these roles seems most intriguing to you? I'll invite you to take a few moments to share your thoughts in the chat. Was there one of them that as I described them really stood out for you? Maybe seemed really useful or really provocative. And as you're continuing to think about that, I'll go ahead and take a closer look at a few of the roles to help us stretch our thinking about how these kinds of roles could work. The first one I'll highlight is the Family Connection Coordinator. So this was a role that was working with families and caregivers to help meet their short-term needs and also to help involve them in the future life of the school. So this person, or this role, is helping to link families and caregivers to resources and supports that can make things better for them near term. And then they're also seeding longer term systems transformation by involving learners, families and caregivers alongside learners and educators and other community members in shaping new approaches to education that meet their needs. So the school or school district isn't just kind of making up a future direction based on what the people who work there know. We're really consulting directly with families and caregivers in an intentional way to help create those shared visions and approaches that are really responsive to people's needs. So this role would be really focused on authentic communication and engagement and really connecting the learning environment with people across the community. And then the person holding this role would be also working closely with colleagues to help build their capacity for effective family support. And then the partnership navigator is the role that's helping to bridge connections between the school or another learning environment and the community around it. So this kind of role would have a really clear sense of what the educators in the learning community were hoping to achieve and what they needed to realize that. So what resources, whether it's equipment or technology or money, people, might the school need access to and in order to help carry out those instructional plans. The person in this role is helping to build those connections to bring those resources into and around the school. Part of that is also helping learners have the experiences that they need to pursue their interests and feel that their learning is relevant. So this partnership navigator would have a key role in kind of helping link learners out into other sites of where they could learn in their communities, but also bringing in people or organizations into schools or other learning environments where learners are and could learn from them there. So it's really building webs of connection and support between the school and the community around it. And part of this person's role would be to work with other educators to make sure that learning happening across multiple sites or in multiple ways were recognized so that learners got credit for the kinds of experiences in which they engage outside of the traditional walls of school. And then again, working really highly in deep collaboration with other educators to make sure that these efforts align with the overall goals of the learning community. And the last role I'll highlight in greater depth is the Director Advisor of AI. So this role is building the capacity of educators throughout the school district or other learning community to use AI effectively. And it's a position that's a person holds in deep partnership with an AI agent. So an AI agent is a digital entity that is powered by AI and can sense and process information, make decisions, and act autonomously. So this educator role is a joint one between the human and the AI agents. They're working together to understand what's happening with learning in the school and to inform decisions. And we imagine that this director advisor of AI would report to the school district's chief technology officer and also liaise with educators across the district. So just to give an example of how this might work, We could see AI agents helping to collect and analyze insights about the use of AI by other people in the district, and then briefing the human director advisor of AI on those insights. And then the AI agent and the human could be in dialogue about what challenges are emerging, what their root causes might be, what possible solutions and next steps might be. And then each of them could end up with lists of tasks, digital tasks that the AI agent or agents could plan and execute on their own, and then tasks for the human to carry out. And so both entities would be working together really closely and holding each other accountable. So these are just some of the roles that could exist in the future. And now we're going to step into the future. We're going to leave the year 2025 and go out to the year 2035 and talk to a couple of educators who are working in learning environments in that future. I would like to bring into the conversation and introduce Andrea Arona, who's a Learning Spark Facilitator working in Austin, and Erin Daly, a Learner Advocate Advisor based in Memphis. And we're going to have a conversation about what their working lives and motivations are like. And then we'll invite some questions from all of you to continue the conversation. So welcome, Andrea and Erin.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for having us.
So let's start with an overview of your roles. Andrea, can you tell us about what you do and what you're responsible for?
Absolutely. I am a Learning Spark Facilitator for seventh graders at our school here in Austin. And what I do is that alongside our learners, and other educators, of course, I help co-design learning journeys that fit their interests of each of the young learners that I work with. And then in doing so, what I'm hoping to do and what I'm responsible for, it's really for creating positive experiences for them, like where they would be, where they are able to master competencies at the same time as they are exploring their own personal interests.
It sounds like you're really getting to dig into the specifics of learning with young people every day. Erin, I'm curious to hear from you. What's your role and what does it involve?
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for having me. So I'm a learner advocate advisor, which the nuance between me and Andrea is there, but we're both student centered. So we're working with learners every day. My role is a little bit more about building relationships, helping learners really manage change throughout their journey, understanding what they want, short-term and long-term for their journey, and getting them the resources to be able to do that. So while Andrea focuses a lot more maybe on like the curriculum and the activities, that real like learning piece, mine is working more on getting all of the parties who are involved with this youth learning at play. So connecting to family, connecting to the partnership navigator in case they have a partnership that I think would be helpful for some of my youth to be a part of, connecting to the Learning Spark facilitators like Andrea, and just making sure that our student, our collective learner is really managing that change and getting to the aspirations and their well-being is in a good place as they're moving through that. Catherine, did you want me to talk a little bit about how many students I have, or is that going to come in a second?
Why don't you go ahead and tell us about that?
Yeah, actually, I think I was pre-anticipating your question because I'm so excited to talk about it. But I usually have, so I have about 60 learners at a time in all age ranges, from the little babies to those learners who are about to graduate. And I spend a lot of time working with them one-on-one. Some days that could, I'm gonna pause there because I know we're getting a really fun question in a second, but I just want to let you know I have about 60 learners at any time that I'm working with.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what a typical day looks like for you as you do all that customized support and work with that wide range of learners?
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, 60, it's funny because when I was a classroom teacher, 60 learners did not seem a lot when you have 120 over the span of however many periods. But 60 learners is a lot for this role. There's a lot of things that go on to supporting them. But like I said, my role is a lot of kind of the well-being of the student and making sure that they have the supports, whether it's mental health supports, whether it's partnership supports, whether it's family support, whatever support they need to kind of make and manage change, to think about what they want and advocate for it. So I usually spend my day, no day looks the same, but it's one-on-ones with students, depending on, sometimes I am advising them to come and see me, right? If they're still kind of learning when they need support. Sometimes, especially with the older ones, they're setting appointments with me and they're saying, hey, I need some help right now. I need to talk through something, or I need to think about something in my learning, or whatever it is. I spend that time with them, really guiding them through change, guiding them through getting towards their aspirations and the support they need, and really learning how to advocate for themselves. Also, my day could be made up of spending some time with folks like Andrea, right? Connecting with the Learning Spark facilitators and saying, hey, my students are really in need of this, or I have this one particular student, or I may just have a student in her class, like one of the classes that she's regularly assisting, who we haven't talked about before. So there's all kinds of reasons. It could be meeting with some families to say like, hey, here's what I'm hearing from your learner, or even just being an adult in the room when they're talking with family, like being a support. It could be meeting with a partnership navigator and saying like, hey, I have a whole group of youth who are really interested in this and seeing that this would be helpful for them in meeting their goals. Can you help me get a partnership here? So really there is no day that is the same, but I see myself as sort of like a systems connector in terms of the well-being and change management of a student's life. So yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, thanks for that, Erin. It sounds like you're really having to have a really strong understanding of who all the people in the learning community are and how they are contributing to both knowing the 60 learners you're supporting super well, but also all the adults around them, so you can help make those connections.
Yeah, and Diana asked a quick question about how large the schools are you're working in. So I'm working in Memphis City Schools. So they're a regular sort of urban district size school. That could mean that a high school is anywhere from 1,000 students to 1,500. Just giving that off the top of my head, if that's helpful, Diana.
And Andrea, I'm curious to hear the same from you. What does your typical day look like?
Yes, I think I do have more of a typical day. I think my days usually kind of distribute in like these two big buckets. So like one of them is when I'm like actively facilitating, hosting some kind of like learning experience, either physically or, in some sort of like online environment. Or on the other side, like if I'm not doing that, most of the time I'm designing those, like what will be those experiences, right? Mm-hmm. So what that looks like is that I could still be working actively with students in doing the designing, but we would usually work as a team. So it would be students, it would be me, but it would also include other educators and other people in the different roles. So over here in Austin, we also have our learner advocate advisors that work with us in coordinating, similar to what Erin was kind of outlining. But in what I do, it's kind of like putting all that together and coordinating those efforts, so we are creating the learning experiences that again are merging the interest with the mastering of competencies. Yeah, so like any combination of like the work in those two buckets is kind of like what a typical day of a Learning Spark facilitator looks like over here.
Yeah, it sounds like your job really opens up the old idea of educator planning time and makes it very collaborative and co-creative with the learners and the other educators in your learning community.
We try.
And Andrea, how did you prepare for this role?
You know what, that is a good question, because I used to be a classroom teacher, but I was feeling very overwhelmed by all the responsibilities that I felt were on my plate, and what I really wanted to do with my career, and kind of like what I wanted to put into the students was just like to have more intentional time to dedicate to work with them and creating their learning versus me just like trying to guess that. Which it would put me in a kind of difficult position. So I saw that the University of Texas here in Austin had a certificate for Learning Spark Facilitators, and I started to look a little bit more into that. And I noticed that I already had some of the requirements for as a teacher. And this would just give me the opportunity to kind of focus on building that that kind of like more specialized support for the learners. And what I really loved about that program is since they were just like getting it started, they were also looking for the school to partner with the certification. So the school would come along in being a pioneer in testing what a Learning Spark facilitator would look like, especially locally, and see how those differences would play out. So I'm very grateful for my school for kind of coming along with me in this journey, and for the University of Texas to really opening up this opportunity for the community as well.
And you were a pioneer along with your school, but now there are quite a few Learning Spark facilitators in your school.
Yeah, this was now a few years ago. Around 5-7 years ago was when I started the program. And yes, we still work with teachers in the classrooms. They are also part of the educators that we kind of work with in designing the learning experiences. But some of us get to focus more specifically on this while they hold kind of like a different overseeing perspective, and they still kind of leverage the experience that they have in their teaching profession.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And Erin, how did you prepare to become a learner advocate advisor?
Yeah, first of all, hook 'em. I went to UT Austin, so I love the shout out that UT Austin is helping out with all of this. I started out as a teacher as well, and I think really what was most meaningful for me when I was learning about the school system and being a teacher was it felt like teachers didn't really have, at least in the schools I was working in, we struggled to have the time to really build meaningful relationships, especially associated with needing to get the curriculum through and testing. And this was over 10 years ago, right? But still, it was a time that it kind of felt like this rat race to get to the test. And so, one, I was teaching, I recognized relationships were something we really needed in classrooms to ensure student well-being. Also, I really noticed that a lot of my students really struggled with change, right? And resiliency toward change, and even being able to be aspirational. You know, it was kind of like, well, the test was the aspiration. No, what's beyond that, right? And so I stepped out of teaching for a little while, intending to kind of go more into education systems and working at this higher level. And I really spent some time learning about systems thinking and learning about change management and all these sort of meta ideas about like how could we change the system to make this better, to make it so teachers can build relationships, to make it so students are able to navigate change more. And through that, really just got this opportunity, saw this pop up at a local Memphis City school as a pilot program. And I thought, you know what? I miss the youth. And I have all, I think, the skill sets to do that on a smaller level. And so really now what I do is I feel like I use my systems thinking to kind of see the full system to help the student get to really what the root of the issue is whenever things are happening. But then also use that to really make connections, not only just me and the student making that relationship connection, but where else can we pull in different resources to help that student thrive and be able to advocate for themselves and to navigate change. So yeah, I guess I would say just an educator a little frustrated with how things were going, seeking some answers and thankfully ending up back with youth in a way that I think is very meaningful.
Yeah, and it sounds like for both your roles, the path in can be pretty flexible. I know, Andrea, you pursued a formal certification. Erin, it sounds like you had your own learning journey, and then other learner advocate advisors might come at the role a different way.
Yes, and I was going to answer Diana's questions real quick because I see them. Yes, Diana, it's being a guidance counselor was kind of what it would be called 10 years ago. There's a lot of aspects of guidance counseling still in this, but definitely kind of filling out that larger support system, really thinking from that systems thinking perspective, and 100% on preaching on systems thinking in schools. Yes, not only is it great for me as someone supporting youth, but I often use small systems thinking tools to kind of help the whole plethora of adults around this learner understand how we need to work together and why things may be going the way they're going.
Andrea, and I'm wondering what you've been celebrating over the last month or so.
Huh. Let's see. One of the things that I appreciated from my school in how they kind of adopted some of the recommendations that the certification came with was that it included a stipend for my professional development, and that I get to coordinate that with an educator development coach too. So it's not just like, you know, money that nobody's gonna keeping me accountable for, and that it's not really like aligned to anything. So I am, very grateful for the opportunity to kind of count on this money every year, like knowing that I just get to have this stipend to even like plan for, like I can, for example, if I'm interested in pursuing some sort of program, but that it's like in modules, I can go ahead and plan for it for the next, 3 years or so. And I just signed up for a new program that it's going to be online, coming out of Montana's instruction courses. And I just love that I have kind of like that agency to really like pick and choose. And I know that it wasn't like this before. 10 years ago, I didn't have the same power to just like go ahead and do it and be so independent in picking relevant professional development that it's going to really kind of move my career forward and align my interests with the goals of the school.
Sounds like your professional learning is pretty much as highly personalized as that of the learners whom you're supporting.
Yes.
Erin, what about you? What's something that's been worth celebrating recently?
Where do we begin? So many things we're celebrating. Also, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, so sorry if I haven't gotten to your question yet. Let's see. The main thing that I'm really excited about. So I have, and Gail, this might get to your question a little bit when you're talking about, do I meet with learners one-on-one or kind of as a group? It depends. I especially meet with learners one-on-one more often, but for instance, I have a group of learners that I'll probably be meeting more collectively with a little bit, because really at the root of what we're seeing, something that they all want is they want to be more community involved with their learning in the future and in the present. And so I'm trying to think of sort of what is a learning experience that can facilitate that, which also gives them that feeling of giving back, which is good for their well-being, which is good for their resiliency in the community. So anyways, our partnership navigator came to me with an opportunity a couple weeks ago. It's called a youth design crew, and it is run by a community center here in Memphis, and not associated with the schools, but obviously trying to get youth involved. And what they do is it's adults and youth that meet together on a regular basis to learn things like design thinking, systems thinking, futures thinking, any kind of sort of human-centered problem solving situation. In order, also like organizational dynamics, really just everything, everything that helps you understand people and problem solving. And they do these learner circles, but then on top of that, they take on community projects. So the community will come to them and say, hey, we really need help with a recycling program. Or, hey, we have this issue where we have a lot of people, I don't know why I'm on trash right now, but leaving trash out on the street, right? So these students will work with adults not only to learn the skills to then come up with innovative solutions, and also the skills to be in partnership with community around co-creating solutions, but then they actually go out and try to do those things and really make a difference in their community. And so I'm really excited that hopefully we're going to make that connection. And Gail, to your question, if there are youth that are a collective, let's say I have 5 youth in that group, we might meet together at some point to have sort of not group therapy, that doesn't sound exciting, but like group reflection, group learning, group understanding, as they are working together to meet their collective goals.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that example. It really helps kind of bring to life some of the results of the advocacy that you do and that you help youth do for themselves. Erin, what do you wish you'd known 10 years ago? Curious what advice you'd give your past self.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. When I think 10 years ago, I really think about when I was in my role as a teacher, even though that was a little bit over 10 years ago. And there were a lot of things that when I became a teacher, it was like, okay, you have to get the lesson plan done. You have to do this. You have to get this task, blah, blah. I wish I would have told myself, no, it's about relationships. And that's not that I wasn't building relationship, but like that is the big deal. It's about relationships and how we support students in growing those relationships with adults and other peers. And another thing is like, something I've learned is we have to teach youth, just like we have to teach adults still, how to manage change, right? And so spending more time in my classroom, really helping them navigate uncertainty and navigate change, I think would have been really meaningful to my students, and also made my life a little bit easier. But now I'm thankful that I'm in a role where I can support educators doing that, and I can also take a little bit off their hands, right? That I can help the youth kind of grow in really kind of thinking about transitions and change and where they want to be.
Yeah, kind of a shift in perspective and a matter of degree, not kind. Yeah. Andrea, what about you? What do you wish you'd known 10 years ago?
I think for me, as a teacher, so kind of like in having the expectations and the assumptions just like so ingrained in my work, it was hard for me to let go, like to really allow myself to say like, this is what I want to focus on, and I'm gonna need to leave all these responsibilities to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really hard transition, and something that it took me years to really like not feel. And it's not even like that I was missing out. It was not something necessarily that I missed. It was just like for so long it was expected that all these responsibilities would fall on the teachers, that it's like letting that go, and also even like bringing others along in letting that go, was something that I wish I would have been kinder with myself. And so like now 10 years later, that I could have this like honest talk with my past self and just be like, it's gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like reassure myself a little bit. I think that, yeah, I wish that there would have been somebody there to tell me that.
Yeah. And it sounds like you kind of had to learn that for yourself and then also kind of coach the people around you to treat you differently than the typical teacher role.
Yeah.
Andre, what do you wish you had more time for?
I was just talking about time in the chat with Diana, and I wish that there would be more time for me personally to kind of linger in those like aha moments that my students are having. Even with the changes that we've made, I think there could be still more space for kind of like enjoying those realizations and reflecting on the insights that we're having. And I said we because, you know, sometimes I'm finding myself also having some like realizations as I am facilitating some of the lessons. And I just, yeah, I wish we had a little bit more time for that. And even in not only like individually, but as a group, that, you know, not everyone has these aha moments at the same time. So sometimes you just need to a little bit more of time to like allow for that to like sink in a little bit more. And you know, we've definitely made some progress towards that, but there's more that we could be doing, and more time wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah. Time is always so precious. Erin, what about you? What do you wish you had more time for?
Yeah, what about everything? Sleep? No, I'm just kidding. I think a couple things off the top of my head are you know, I really wish I'm building. I work closely with the partnership navigator to build again these community connections or these resource connections. I wish I had a little more time to maybe spend going with my youth to some of those engagements and being a support there, but also just like witnessing it and seeing what's happening as a observer, so that it's easier for me to reflect with them. I think I wish I had more time to you know, you always wish you had more time with the students. I think we've got it at a pretty good rate right now where it's about 60 kids per load. But still, some days kids need more than they do other days. And so it's even though the system is more flexible now, like I may have an hour with a student on one day, but need to cut that hour at an hour because I have another meeting. So maybe more flexibility essentially to be present with a learner when need to. We're working on that, but it's not perfected right now.
Yeah. I'm hearing reflection, more time for reflection as a theme across both of your responses.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you both for sharing about your experiences and the continuing development of your practice. It's been a pleasure exploring your roles together.
Thank you.
I'm still over here answering questions in the chat. Pardon my pause, Catherine.
No worries. So now we're going to return to the present. We're coming back to the year 2025. And Erin and Andrea are going to step back into their day-to-day roles as well. So Erin and Andrea are actually colleagues of mine at KnowledgeWorks who work on our strategic foresight team, helping them imagine the future possibilities we've been exploring. And we would all like to take some questions from you. They can continue to be about the specific roles that were enacted. And also we're open to taking a wide range of questions. I see one in the chat, which is whether our intention was for all of the roles to be school level or whether some would be more at the LEA level. We imagined a mix. So, and I think it could work different ways in different places, but we were specifically imagining that some of the ones we created would be at the school district level. So in particular, the continuous improvement curator, the director advisor of AI, and the chief opportunity officer were ones that we saw being at the district level, so that their services could support multiple schools. And I think some of those same kind of capacities might not even need to exist in a school. And I was in one conversation where someone was observing that in her context, some of these kinds of things are happening with kind of intermediate organizations that are supporting groups of schools. I see another question asking what immediate steps should educational leaders take to shift from traditional educator roles toward these innovative ones while acknowledging any current organizational resistance? I think that's one we can all weigh in on. One thing that comes to mind in regard to the Learning Spark Facilitator is that a lot of it is about kind of embodying the love of learning, like modeling that, and then kind of bringing a spirit of inquiry to co-creating learning journeys along with learners. So I wonder if it might be possible for people working in teaching roles to play with those concepts, even if it's for, in small ways for part of the time, but to maybe bring that kind of sense of crafting learning journeys together, modeling that inquiry, which I know many teachers already do in various ways, but it might be something to push on. And then I think for all of the roles, we were aware that there were kind of current ones that are kind of similar. So I think too about the partnership navigators. So there are various kinds of community connector roles in different schools and other contexts. So again, wondering about kind of educators consulting with one another across a school or their learning community to say, could we make that any of those kind of community connection efforts that we have going on now that much more intentional, so that we're really making sure they're driven by what we're trying to achieve and the ways, the learning experiences we're trying to provide for young people. And I know schools do this, but like maybe even protect a little more about the things that come in that might not be sought, it's kind of trying to find that balance.
Yeah, I would also add that, even you being here in this conversation, it's already kind of like a step towards, learning how things could be different, right? To Catherine's point earlier, like you cannot realize what you cannot imagine. So if seeing these 8, but also as I think Diana was mentioning in the chat, the different ways, the different places in which they are piloting or testing different roles that might not have these names, could be even doing different things altogether, but that are just like pushing that, like asking the questions of what if things could be different? What if we could have somebody doing this thing? What if teachers don't have to do all of these things all at once? What if? And so I think there's value there, and even in like collecting these stories. So like as you are learning some of it here, there are also other resources that would tell you more. And I personally am a big fan of the work that ASU, the University of Arizona, is doing with the team-based structure models and how they're piloting some of these in schools in Arizona. So you could actually go and visit the schools and see how these different roles interact. And they are, also playing with other ideas, even some of students' roles as well. So again, it's just a matter of like starting asking the questions and starting to like inform ourselves of what's happening and bringing that back into the organizations, the schools, the after school, the libraries that you're a part of. So you start kind of like planting those seeds of ideas that could spark change, in people, in organizations.
I'm just going to take a meta perspective here. So I'm agreeing with everything that Catherine and Maria is saying, and I know that we said initial steps, so maybe smaller, but also thinking about, do you need to revisit if you have a shared vision, if you have shared, whatever that is, revisit that. If you don't have it, come up with that, right? And think about, what do we want in these 10 years, and do these educator roles start to fill a gap or a need that we have moving forward? And it could be that the ones in this paper absolutely do, right? It could be that you'll come up with other ones. Like in the publication, there is a template to help you think through other educator roles that might be valuable for your specific local context. But basically what I'm trying to articulate is, one, I wouldn't suggest starting to go do any things without first assessing where you already are. You may be doing some of this stuff with a different name. And then also I think like when you have change, right? Like if you're changing roles, Sometimes we just need to change the role, right, as the experts on the education system we're in. But also, if you're revisiting your vision, if you're having those conversations around vision and what you want for the future, you inherently will probably have more in the room, like caregivers, students, other folks. They can also be in that space with you to think about, do these educator roles feel like the right ones moving forward? Or is a youth experiencing this educator role in some way and we just haven't named it, right? Like maybe some of this is already happening. So really getting that North Star picture, getting the right people in the room and assessing where you are and what out of what's given here or other ideas you come up with could be helpful for transitioning.
Yeah, and Diana, I see your comment about starting with the big idea, like what is the reason we all come to school every day? And then how can we support people in our systems? I think part of that shared visioning and aspiration setting you're describing, Anna, does relate to purpose. What is it that we're here to do in education generally, in our learning community specifically, and then how might we align our efforts around it?
And I think that to some extent was the process that we went through in developing these roles. We asked the workshop participants kind of like, what is the job that we want schools to be doing in 10 years? And then from whatever came from that, it's like, okay, so who do we want to make responsible for that job that we said that needs to be done? Let's think about that. And that's what kind of sparked the conversations around these 8 different roles.
Yeah, absolutely, Diana. It could be a site-based conversation to kick off that is honestly something that in my role at KnowledgeWorks, when I go out and do shared visiting aspiration at the beginning of these change processes that a district or a school is going through, 100%, we can do that bigger picture. And then this is a resource to bring in for deeper thinking about strategy, about how are we going to get to that future, whatever that change is that you're wanting.
Catherine, did you want to mention something about the conversations that have been happening with the Salzburg group since Nicolene Dupree's mentioned something about cross-continent collaboration?
Sure, yeah. I have been having the opportunity to collaborate with Salzburg Global Rethinking Assessment, which is based in the UK, and Learning Planet Institute, which is based in France, to do a workshop series related to future educator roles. So we were looking in this international context around possibilities for educator roles that support new approaches to learning. So we're drawing on this kind of thinking we've been exploring today and hosting publicly open workshops starting on May 15th, and there will also be one in June and one in July at different times to kind of help it be accessible to people in different parts of the world. But we're really trying to extend the conversation into a global context. And then also we're planning to collect ideas that surface in those workshops and share them more broadly. So yeah, it's this kind of thinking that, as we're highlighting, can apply in a lot of contexts, but as I see you noting, Nicolene, what the roles would be very different in different places because the needs are different and all the structures of learning are different. I'm excited to see the kinds of ideas that come out of that workshop series. And one of the things we bring in when we think about doing design beyond the rules we've shared is what are the needs you're trying to meet? We named some that were important to us in approaching this work, but there are many others, of course. What are the drivers of change specific to your context? There are many that could be chosen that might be more pertinent in a given place. And so really thinking about approaching that design in the context of local specifics, local needs, and awareness of what learning community is trying to achieve. Thank you for joining us today. We're coming to the end of our time. We'll invite you to, if you'd like to hear more from KnowledgeWorks about future possibilities or other aspects related to student-centered learning, this QR code gives you a chance to sign up for our newsletter and keep an eye out for ongoing opportunities to engage. We do have another webinar looking more generally at kind of what's ahead for education, scheduled for June 23rd. And also we will, in late summer, be launching brand new, fresh, big forecasts on the future of learning. Just taking a step back and saying kind of what are the big things on the horizon now that could affect education. So we invite you to stay in touch and really appreciate your time and engagement.